Hi, hello and namaste. This is Naveen Kumar Mergu. Welcome back to Hotel and Hospitality. In continuation to the origin and the long travel of the coffee beans, today we are going to discuss about the coffee manufacturing procedure. The coffee we enjoy today in our cup has a long process of manufacturing procedure. From the time the fruits picked up from the coffee plant till the ground coffee, it involves various steps in the manufacturing process. Before going into the topic, please do not forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get regular notifications. Also, please share among your friends and colleagues. A coffee bean actually is seed. If it is dried, roasted and ground, it is used to brew a coffee. If the seed isn't processed, it can be planted and grown into a coffee plant. Coffee seeds are generally planted in large beds in shaded nurseries. These seeds are frequently watered and shaded from the bright sunlight until they are hardy enough to be permanently planted. Planting often takes place in the wet season so that the soil remains moist while the roots are firmly established. Harvesting the cherries. Depending upon the variety, it will take approximately 3 to 4 years for a coffee plant to bear fruits. The fruit, called the coffee cherry, turns bright and deep red when it is ready to be harvested. These fruits are harvested in two ways, mechanical and manual. In manual process, the fruits are hand-picked in a labor-intensive and a difficult process. Whether it is manual or mechanical, these fruits are harvested in two ways. In the first method, called strip-picked, all the fruits are stripped off from the branch at one time, whether it is mechanical or manual. In the second method, called selectively picked, the fruits are picked by hand selectively. It is more labor intensive and costly. A good picker averages approximately 100 to 200 pounds of coffee cherries a day, which will produce about 20 to 40 pounds of coffee beans. Once the harvesting is done, these beans are then transported to a processing plant. Processing the cherries. Once the coffee has been picked, the processing must begin as quickly as possible to avoid the spoilage of fruit. Depending upon the locality and the local resources, coffee is processed in one of the two ways. They are dry method and wet method. The dry method, it is the age-old method of processing coffee. It is still used in many countries where the water resources are very limited. In this process, the freshly picked cherries are simply spread out on huge surfaces to dry in the sun. In order to prevent the cherries from spoiling, they are racked and turned throughout the day, then covered at night or during rain to prevent them from getting wet. Depending upon the weather, this process might continue for several weeks for each batch of coffee until the moisture content of the cherries drops to 11%. The wet method removes the pulp from the coffee cherry after harvesting, so the bean is dried with only the parchment skin left on. First, the freshly harvested cherries are passed through a pulping machine to separate the skin and pulp from the bean. They are passed through a series of rotating drums which separates them by size. Then the beans are separated by weight as they pass through water channels. The lighter beans float to the top, while the heavier ripe beans sink to the bottom. After separation, the beans are transported to large water-filled fermentation tanks. Depending upon a combination of factors such as the condition of the beans, the climate and the altitude, they will remain in these tanks for anywhere from 12 to 48 hours to remove from the slick layer of mucilage that is still attached to the parchment. While resting in the tanks, naturally occurring enzymes will cause this layer to dissolve. When fermentation is complete, the beans feel rough to the touch. The beans are rinsed by going through additional water channels and are ready for drying. Drying the beans. If the beans have been processed by wet method, the pulp and the fermented beans must now be dried to approximately 11% moisture to properly prepare them for the storage. These beans, still inside the parchment envelope, can be sun-dried by spreading them on drying tables or floors, where they are turned regularly, or they can be machine-dried in large tumblers. The dried beans are known as parchment coffee and are warehoused in jute or sisal bags until they are ready for export. Milling the beans. Before being exported, the parchment coffee is processed through a series of steps. Hulling. Hulling machinery removes the parchment layer endocarp from wet processed coffee. Hulling dry processed coffee refers to removing the entire dried husk, the exocarp, mesocarp and endocarp of the dried cherries. Polishing. It is an optional process where any silver skin that remains on the beans after hulling is removed by machine. While polished beans are considered superior to unpolished ones, in reality there is a little difference between the two. Grading and sorting. It is done by size and weight, and beans are also reviewed for color flaws or other imperfections. Beans are sized by being passed through a series of screens. They are also sorted pneumatically by using an air jet to separate heavy from the light beans. Typically, the size of a bean is represented on a scale of 10 to 20. The number represents the size of a round hole's diameter in terms of 1/64 of an inch. A number 10 bean would be the approximate size of a hole in a diameter of 10/64 of an inch, and a 15 number bean would be 15/64 of an inch. Finally, the defective beans are removed either by hand or machinery, ensuring that the finest quality beans are exported. Tasting the coffee. The milled beans are now referred to as green beans. Coffee is repeatedly tested for their quality and taste. This process is called as cupping. It usually takes place in a room specifically designed to facilitate the process. First, the taster, usually called the cupper, evaluate the beans for their overall visual quality. The beans are then roasted in a small laboratory roaster, immediately ground and infused in boiling water with carefully controlled temperature. The cupper noses the brew to experience its aroma, an essential step in judging the coffee's quality. After letting the coffee rest for several minutes, the cupper breaks the crust by pushing aside the grounds at the top of the cup. Again, the coffee is nosed before the tasting begins. To taste the coffee, the cupper slurps a spoonful with a quick inhalation. The objective is to spray the coffee evenly over the cupper's taste buds and then weigh it on the tongue before spitting it out. Samples from different batches and different beans are tasted daily. Coffees are not only analyzed to determine their characteristics and flaws, but also for the purpose of blending different beans or creating a proper roast. An expert cupper can taste hundreds of coffee samples a day and still can taste the subtle differences between them. Roasting the beans. Roasting transforms the green beans into the aromatic brown beans. Most roasting machines maintain a temperature of 550 degrees Fahrenheit. The beans are kept moving throughout the entire process to keep them from burning. When they reach an internal temperature of about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, they begin to turn brown and the caffeoil, a fragrant oil locked inside the beans, begins to emerge. This process is called pyrolysis, is at the heart of the roasting. It produces the flavor and aroma of the coffee we drink. After roasting, the beans are immediately cooled either by air or water. Grinding the coffee. The objective of a proper grind is to get the most flavor in a cup of coffee. The coffee beans are grinded after the roasting process. How coarse or fine the coffee beans are ground, it depends upon the brewing method. These are the different steps involved in the coffee manufacturing procedure. Continue to follow the channel for more interesting videos. Thank you and signing off.